St. Mary's College of Maryland is an honors college that takes pride in its beautiful scenery and challenging academics. This documentary explores the phenomenon of code switching on this campus.
Linguists define code switching as the act of consciously or unconsciously switching between dialects or languages in different social settings. Most of us switch out social codes many times throughout the day. But the question is it natural?
To find the answers to this question, we interview students and faculty on our campus to see what their opinions are on the matter.
What is code switching?
Well, it means a lot of different things, but I understand it to mean that when you kind of change your language to fit your audience, I guess, so you could do that for a lot of different reasons.
Code switching is when a person talks differently to a specific audience, depending on if it's their friend or associate or superior.
Code switching is when you talk to different people differently, depending on what you feel your relation to them is, or how, in my personal experience, how comfortable you are with them.
Code switching is when you alter the way you verbally communicate with people based on social roles that those people occupy.
Code switching is changing the way you speak around certain groups of people or social things.
It's when you're in an environment and instead of acting like yourself, you switch it up to be able to adapt to the people surrounding your environment.
When I think of code switching, I think about someone trying to be someone they're not in order to get access to something or someone in a way.
Do you know what code switching is?
No.
I can't tell you.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, here's some examples.
For instance, when I talk to someone I don't personally know, for example, like a professor today at my advisory meeting, I speak differently, I use different slang around him than I do with my friends, for example.
When I'm with my family, I act, very mature and responsible, and when I'm with my friends, I act out and act silly.
Good morning, what's up, bro? Versus, good morning, sir, how are you doing today? Completely two different ways to greet.
If a person is talking to their friends, they talk a certain way, they use slang, but then when they talk to their parents, they might switch it up. I feel like that could be code switching. But also, if you're talking to a supervisor, you want to also be more respectable, so they talk in a proper tone or proper form of language.
So if you're talking to children, for instance, then you might use a different kind of language. You might explain your terms or use simpler language. When you're talking to little kids, then you censor yourself. I try not to say curse words around little kids. And where you might use bigger words. I mean, if you're a cursor, you might curse with adults.
Maybe in a setting in which you're interacting with friends and then you have to later interact with the professor, you won't necessarily use the same language that you would use with the professor, with your friends, and vice versa.
How do you feel about code switching?
I don't really have any feelings for it or against it. Sometimes it's necessary, I'd say, like for the example you just gave. Definitely when you're talking to superiors, you don't talk to them the same way that you talk to your friends and people, your peers.
I mean, code switching is cool. You always got to be able to switch it up a bit. You don't want to seem like a hood person or a too proper-like person, if you get what I'm saying. So, I mean, I like code switching.
I feel like it's acceptable just as long as people know that there's limits, that you shouldn't completely change who you are in front of other people. But I feel like it's fine as long as you're doing it to connect to the different environments that you're in.
You know, I'm a sociologist, so we always know that we're communicating with different audiences and that context means a lot. And so I think it's a natural part of what we do as individuals. And to try to communicate effectively, we're always trying to use the right language, the right terminology. But it might also mean kind of when you don't have to make certain assumptions, that when you're talking to someone you know they know what you're talking about, then you can use slang or acronyms or something like that. So I think it's pretty normal, and not, for me, it's not something to worry about. I think it's an interesting part of communication.
I guess I would say it's a good thing, because I think that it's good to be able to like be professional when you need to be, and I think that it's also good to like have the ability to calm yourself down, let down your guard, just like enjoy yourself with your friends.
I do have some reservations when it's used just to get an advantage. If you're trying to if you're trying to present yourself as something that you're not, I do have some issues with that.
Do you code switch?
Yeah, I think everybody does.
I do code switch. Right now I'm code switching.
No, I think, and I have to reflect to my niece, she calls me a whitey on the inside and a blackie on the outside, so I think I naturally am built that way, so I don't think I do it in a way. That's just the person I am.
Is code switching necessary?
I think it's a necessary thing. Many people will take different words or different ways you say things in different ways. If you tell a personal joke among your intimate friends to a stranger, they're not going to understand what you're saying, and in fact sometimes they might feel slightly insulted or left out. So I think that it's like a white lie, perhaps, but I think it's necessary.
I do, yes. Mainly because we don't all come to a conversation or a time of communication with the same understanding, and so I do think it's necessary. That's what I mean, I guess, when I say it's normal. I think it will always be with us. Now, whether we're talking about, I mean, maybe there are times when you can eliminate code switching, like you use sort of a common denominator of language, perhaps. But I think that's hard to do. So I think that we're imperfect beings, and so chances are we're always going to be code switching.
I think it's necessary in certain aspects, because I shouldn't talk to my friends the same way I'm talking to a boss or a professor, something like that.
I think in certain situations it's important to know how you should conduct yourself. So I guess I would say yes.
Is code switching more prominent in some cultures than in others?
I would say cultures where there's a high level of ritual propriety in society and a lot of levels of stratification.
Yeah, I feel definitely like minorities in general code switch more than non-minorities, just because there's this perception out for minorities, so when we're around those people that uphold that judgment or stereotype, we tend to want to like prove them wrong, so we code switch.
Well, my experience is not entirely broad. I lived in Taiwan for 3 years. I visited China, and I was born in Malaysia. And what I can say is that the people in those countries often have two masks. Their friendly mask and their reserved mask. And when they're not in a formal situation, they're often very friendly. I was a small, adorable, blonde and brown-haired little white boy, and all of the Asian mothers were very happy and friendly to see me, and they like pinching my cheeks and stuff. But as I grew older and people grew more reserved, there was that kind of switch in the mass to like treating me as an adult. So I think there are more masks in America. I say masks, of course. I mean just code switching, just like how you present yourself to a different person. It's a hard thing to explain, but I think there are more social expectations with the history that this country has had, especially with race, homosexuality, and alternative genders, and stuff like that, that people just can't be comfortable talking the same way. Those are questions that either don't exist or have not yet come up in most Asian countries.
I think it's not so much like cultural, it's just like where you live. Like I've noticed a lot of people like I'm live around DC and I spend a lot of time in DC, so for people from certain parts of the city speak differently than other parts of the city.
I think when you're in the minority in whatever it is, but when you're in the minority in an organization, so like St. Mary's, that you probably do have to code switch a little bit more, in that you're probably talking, you might go back and forth between talking with people who share your assumptions and shorthand and slang to another group that doesn't, and that's always going to be the case if you're in whatever that minority is.
What age group do you feel code switches the most?
Between young adults and teenagers, because they're at a point in their lives where a lot of the things they say like directly influence their futures. So they're not in a position of where they can just be whoever they are. They kind of have to be a certain way to get by in the world.
Because young adults are lower down in the social hierarchy and are more required to sort of pay dividends and respect to those above them in society, and at the same time, when you're young, you feel a lot more compelled to sort of fit in.
The 16 to 25, because I think because we're equally around friends and in professional settings, so we have to do it the most. But I think adults are like more in professional settings than we are, and children are more around friends than we are. So I think it's equal. We spend an equal amount of time in professional settings and around our friends.
Is code switching essential to our society?
I definitely think code switching is essential because you have to decipher between business life and social life.
Yes, if we want to understand one another, I do think it is.
Yes, I think it's entirely essential. I think that if people didn't code switch, there would be a lot more misunderstandings.
It is kind of essential to I'm going to speak to somebody a lot different than I speak the president. There are certain forms of respect that need to be there. And if we were all super polite all the time, that'd be exhausting.
Yes, unfortunately. We live in a racist society, so people expect people to act a certain way or to know certain things or perform a certain way. And when you don't perform that certain way, then you're critiqued, if not ostracized altogether. So in order to be successful in the United States, yeah, you have to code switch.
So, is code switching natural?
When it happens the first time when I'm talking to that person, it's not natural. I go in knowing that I'm going to sit a certain way and I'm going to speak to them a certain way, but when I see then every time after that, it just happens naturally, it turns on.
Does it happen naturally, or do you?
Yeah, I think it does, because I can get off the phone with my mom and then change the way I speak very quickly when I'm talking to one of my friends or something like that.
I think it is a learned mechanism to deal with social expectations. That is, if we go back to the toddler doesn't know how to code switch. The toddler doesn't understand why he should act necessarily differently. Even if you go younger, even the infant especially, an infant adopted from birth will think he has a different mother if he's never told, right? And they can think these things, I think, are linked because you act differently around people you are not so close to. That society has said that you should be more reserved around.
You know, I bet for some people they have to be really conscious about it. And maybe again, when you really realize that you're different, and when those markers for that difference are really stark, then you're probably paying a lot more attention to it. But so I suspect it's situation specific, where sometimes you really know you're doing it, and other times you kind of get in the habit of speaking one way with one group of people and another way with another group of people. And I think it's a danger to think that you're not being authentic when you do that, or somehow true to yourself, because I do think it's something that we all do, and that you're not sort of selling out by speaking one way to one group and another way to another group. But I can see how it might sometimes feel that way. You feel like you've kind of abandoned your roots. That's it.
That's it. That's a wrap.
I'm sorry.
Wrong.
Wrong. I'm sorry. Which age group do you think code switches most? Like children, teenagers, young adults, or adults?
Oh, like the infant age, like the babies that just come out the womb. It's like, no.
Can you elaborate on this?
Like
Than other parts of the city.
he's playing zombies, dog. Chris? He's playing zombies.
So tell me the answer. Tell me what you think the answer to these questions are. I'm really curious.